Just shove it all in.
The benefit of the tape. They get them on. Wait, that doesn't. You can open it from there.
Sometimes.
And they get a photograph there.
Good afternoon, Paul. You're welcome. Okay. I declare the meeting open to the public and can inform those in attendance in the public gallery that they can use mobile devices through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network 3G, 4G, and should not be used in recordings. Photographs should not be taken. Okay. Apologies for today's meeting. You may just be there. Okay. Committee membership is at page 14 and lists everyone, and can I ask the members to take note of that? Everybody content?
Great.
Okay. Staff details. Members should note then that the contacts for the committee staff are at page 18. Can I introduce Kathy White, sitting to my left, who is the clerk to the committee, and I'll then ask Kathy if she will introduce the team, the infrastructure committee, to members.
Okay, Vincent Gribben, sitting to the right here, is my assistant clerk. Johnny, the person who was helping me, Johnny Lawless, that was helping you with your pack, he's not here, oh, he's over there. That's the clerical supervisor, and Sharon at the bottom is our CO. Behind is Des McKibben, who is one of two researchers that we have. Susie Cape's the other one. So he's just sitting in this morning to hear what goes on because he's part of the team.
Okay. Can I just emphasise to members then the importance of contacting staff if they're unable to attend a meeting, and this will alert the clerk in advance in case there's any potential difficulties with quorum, which we would try and resolve on a Tuesday if we can. Okay. Declaration of interest of members on page 21. Can I advise members that all Assembly members are required to register relevant interests in terms of register of members' interests, and point out that the deadline for registering interests is Thursday the 9th of June. And can I remind members that in addition to this requirement, Standing Order 69(5) states that a member who has A, a financial interest in any matter, or B, relevant interest in any matter, must declare that interest before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly relating to that matter. Everybody content with that? Okay. Advise members that the proceeding of the Assembly includes meetings of this committee. Advise members that this is the first meeting of the committee and should declare any interests held by them which are relevant to the work of the committee. Does any member have any interest to declare at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record and in line with the Code of Conduct, it's to record that in the previous 12 months in joining the Assembly, I was the Director for Northern Ireland of the Community Transport Association, with a financial interest then but not now.
Okay. Any other member? Thank you very much. Can I remind members that the rules governing the registration and declaration of interests are contained in the Code of Conduct with the rules and relating to the conduct of members, and that further advice and guidance is available from the Clerk of Standards, room 243 in Parliament Buildings. Okay, in terms of procedures then, at page 24 is a guide to the powers and operation of statutory committees for chairpersons and members. Page 34 is a guide to the role of the chairperson. Page 39 is a guide to members on the role and functions of the committee office. And page 41, providing an effective research service to committees and good practice guidelines. Can I ask members if they're content to note all of those? Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, guidance on timescales for the interaction between committees and departments. At page 52, there is that guidance on those timescales. Can I ask members to note the guidance paper on the timescales for interaction in between committees and departments? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, item 8. The 2011-16 legacy reports. At page 59 is a legacy report for the Committee for Culture, Arts and Leisure. At page 92, a legacy report for the Committee of Regional Development. At page 105, a legacy report for the Committee for the Environment. At page 133, legacy report on the Committee for the Agriculture and Rural Development. And at page 153, legacy report on the Committee of the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister. Can I ask the members to note and agree that we do so? And if our members have any issues in relation to those papers and legacy reports, that we would deal with them again at the away day in terms of strategic planning in September.
Agreed.
Everyone happy enough?
Chair, can I just make a declaration of interest in terms of legacy issues? And the Department of Arts, Culture and Leisure, I was on the Libraries NI board.
No other member has an interest? No. Okay. Item 9, subordinate legislation. At page 183 is guidance on the handling of subordinate legislation. Can I ask members to note?
Agreed.
Okay. And I just want to read this out in terms of following motion. That the Committee for Infrastructure, under Standing Order 43, resolves to delegate to the Examiner of Statutory Rules any of its functions in relation to the technical scrutiny of the instrument. The Committee further resolves that in carrying out this function, the Examiner shall be authorised to report his technical findings to each statutory rule to the Committee and to the relevant department, as well as the Committee itself, and to publish this report. Is everyone content?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Can I then advise members that there are 11 statutory rules laid in the last mandate that need to be considered by this committee. The statutory rules are at pages 186 to 255. I advise members that 6 of the statutory rules originated from the Department of the Environment and 5 from Regional Development. The committee will consider these statutory rules at next week's committee meeting if members are content.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Departmental first day briefing is at page 256. Are members content?
No.
Happy, do you want to-
Yeah. This only came in yesterday afternoon, and we hope to have the Minister and the Permanent Secretary with us next week. So we'll put this paper back into the pack for next week to talk it through with the Minister. So it's just really for your information to give you time to read it before next week's meeting.
Okay, we'll return to the issue that the Minister's visit perhaps later. Item 11, Assembly Research Briefing, Structures and Issues for the Department of Infrastructure is at page 281 in the Research Briefing paper. Okay, and I would like at this stage welcome Des McKibben, who is the Assembly Researcher and is part of the Infrastructure Committee team. You're very welcome, Des.
Thank you, Chair.
Is Susie Cave going to be joining us?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I just have to apologise on Susie's behalf. There was just the meeting just went a bit ahead of schedule, and Susie had a previous appointment, but I'm sure she'll join me in due course if that's okay with you.
Okay. That's fine. If you want to make a start then.
Yeah, no problem, sir. Thank you. Well, I'll just start off by introducing myself. I'm Des McKibben, and I'm a member of RAISE, which is the Assembly's Research and Information Service. I'm from the research section, which means that we're here to provide research services, whether they're papers, research papers, or information notes, or anything like that for committees and also members in their own private work. The RAISE also has a library which members can make use of, and there's a number of information specialists within the library who can also help them out on any information requests they might have. And there's an education service which members may want to avail of if they can facilitate visits in school, if it's whether it's school visits or constituency visits or anything like that there. And all the information, really, all the contact details are contained within this wee book we've prepared for the new mandate called Consider This. It includes a number of articles of issues that are sort of ongoing from the last mandate that maybe haven't been resolved right across the work of the Assembly, and contributed to by all the various subject specialists within RAISE. So that's just a brief introduction. As I say, we're actually going to contact you all individually, maybe make an appointment to come and see you, and maybe brief you on more thoroughly on what it is we can do for you as members yourselves, and provide you with a copy of Consider This if you haven't already seen it. It's also available on the Assembly's Assistance website if you are familiar with that at this point, if you would like to download it. The purpose of this presentation really is just to give you a really high-level view of the new functions of the Department of Infrastructure. I look at the budget allocation for 16-17. As you know, there's only been a one-year budget produced to enable the new ministers coming in to set their own priorities, but there are some important issues that raises. And a summary of the unresolved issues from the 11-16 mandate. I mean, these are just the issues that we have identified. It's up to you to interpret, determine whether what you bring forward in the future. Some of the issues are dealt with within this paper here. And this.
Apologies for my lateness. That went through quicker than I had expected.
Yeah, I've just briefed the committee, Susie, so I've just introduced Ray's, and I'll just carry on with the functions. As you may know, the DFA has assumed the old responsibilities of DRD. In the previous mandate, I would have been the researcher that would have handled most of those issues. That includes roads, public transport and water, very broadly speaking. But it also has a number of new functions from other departments. So there would have been vehicle regulation, road safety, and the DVA functions from the DOE, and strategic planning from DOE, which Susie would be very familiar with and be the go-to person for any queries in those areas. There's also river agency and inland waterways function from DARD and DCAL respectively. And then there's also some management functions coming over from OFM, DFM relating to Crumlin Road Gale and the St Lucia ex-Ministry of Defence site. So the first thing I did then when looking at the sort of impact of these new functions was to look at the budget, and at this stage we don't really know a lot about what the allocations are for each individual business area, so I looked back at previous allocations. And the first thing that stands out is that going into this mandate, our DFA will have a 9% lower allocation than DRD's actual outturn last year. Even that's with all the new functions. I suppose traditionally DRD has been very successful at in-year monitoring rounds and bringing in funding that way, but there's no guarantees that that'll be the case in this mandate. I mean, there was a lot of excess cash or a lot of excess money about last year because of the funding that was that didn't go forward with the F5, and that it's not clear whether the same situation with departments with much tighter budgets. Not clear whether that'll be the same situation in this mandate. But looking at previous expenditure on different issues, for looking at road safety, for example, the DOE spend in excess of £2 million a year on this issue on promoting road safety. So the committee I'm sure would be keen to seek assurances that this, now that it's competing with a whole broader suite of issues, that the committee that this funding will continue to be committed, because it's been very successful in reducing the number of road accidents, and the research has been carried out to show the public put a great emphasis on those adverts, and they seem to have a real impact on people's driving behaviour. At least that's what the research shows to date anyway. Rivers Agency is an interesting new function because that previously cost in excess of £20 million a year, but it had a relatively low capital allocation, around £3 to £5 million averaging. But given the number of the recent flooding incidents and the commitment in the water strategy to deal with flooding and deal with drainage issues, you would imagine that there's going to be a much higher capital allocation for dealing with flooding. So, I mean, the committee would probably want to assure themselves that this is going to measure up against the minister's other priorities in terms of road and public transport and the other things. There are some things that are clear from this budget. The executive has identified a number of flagship projects that have been allocated funding up to 2021. However, some of these funding allocations bring their own questions. For example, £229 million is allocated to the F5, and according to the previous Minister for Regional Development, this was to cover the new building to Strabane section. But this section is only estimated to cost £170 million, so it's unclear what the excess is for. Is that to continue on with other phases of the scheme, or is it just really been a case that they allocate that's the cost of that's been rising, or maybe that it wasn't thoroughly thought through the allocations. There's also additional funding in place for Belfast Rapid Transit. It is supposed to be delivered by September 2018, but there are funding allocations for 2019-20 and 2021. And there's also a number of high-profile projects that aren't on the flagship project list, including the York Street flyover, which is seen by many private sector stakeholders as being a key project for economic development. So, the committee might wish to ask some questions of the Minister as to where this scheme fits within his priorities. There's an issue that comes up every year for the Regional Development Committee in the past, and now the DFI Committee, no doubt, is the issue of structural maintenance. It consistently gets allocations well below the required level. So much so that at the start of 2007 there was £700 million backlog of maintenance, and now that's almost £1 billion. It stands at almost £1 billion. The majority of that the majority of that backlog relates to B roads, but there is a significant backlog in excess of 120 million on main trunk roads as well, and also a smaller backlog on footpaths. But the committee might want to seek assurance that this isn't impacting road safety. I don't know if thorough assessment has been made of this, but also having such uncertainty over funding for infrastructure maintenance makes the practice very inefficient. There's a lot of money being spent on reactive work when in reality well planned and structured work would be much more efficient. It's really structural maintenance where the committee or where the department are usually so successful at in-year monitoring, and between January 2012 and January 2014 they did attract over £105 million worth of bids. But as I said previously, there was a lot of excess money there rolled about in the last mandate because of the allocation that was made to the F5 that was never actually spent. With the cut in the number of departments and the continued pressure on budgets, it's really unclear whether departments will be handing back as much money, and then what happens to structural maintenance then. It is very important. It's a growing issue really, and it's one the committee probably need to be aware of. I just made a comment in the paper that the committee may, wish to seek what the minister may wish to ask the minister what his views are on the use of in-year monitoring, and whether he has any real plans put in place to deal with the structural maintenance deficit. Are we just going to continue? Is it just going to be continued to let grow, or is it going to be addressed within this mandate? It's an interesting area really to look at. Moving on, one of the next biggest areas for the department is public transport. Certainly in terms of spend. There's been over £1 billion spent on public transport since 2002, and there have been significant upgrades in terms of bus fleets and train, rolling stock and stations have all been upgraded, but we still lag significantly behind other regions in the UK in particular. And despite the investment, which does seem significant, is significant, the targets, modal shift targets, and increased use of public and targets for increased use of public transport just haven't been achieved. If anything, people are using cars more now than they did in 2002. The shift, there's been it's stagnated or grown really, and there. As well as that, looking at the funding of public transport, there's been a failure to deliver a number of key flagship schemes, if you like. The Belfast Rapid Transit scheme is a prime example. It was planned to be operational in March 2012, and it's not expected now until to be completed now to September 2018. So you can imagine that is a big delay. And phase 2 of the Coleraine to Derry Railway isn't expected to be completed to the end of 2016, when that should have been operational in 2015. The Northern Ireland Audit Office has done a review of DRD and Translink and public transport in general in Northern Ireland, and they have concluded that DRD does need to do more to attract people to public transport and make it their choice of travel. It was highly critical of two areas really: the split between funding for roads and public transport, and the staffing and resources allocated to roads versus public transport. It basically concluded that there was a bias towards roads, both in terms of the number of personnel and the expertise levels relating to roads, and there are with public transport. And so the committee may wish to see if the Minister has any plans to address those issues in this mandate. Another area is one of the main areas, one of the big budget areas for the committee to be taken note of is water policy. It's a highly contentious issue, I suppose, around water charging. But when NI Water was established in 2007, the idea was that it would be self-financing through water charges almost immediately or within a couple of years. But it continues to rely for over 76% of its revenue from government subsidies. The result, leaving aside the charging thing, the issue of charging domestic users, the funding structure that it has mean that it operates in a hybrid status, where it operates as both a public corporation and as a non-departmental public body, and this brings around an awful lot of unnecessary, unwanted pressures, I guess, in terms of reporting, and it operates it has the burden of being a public body with things like no end-of-year flexibility over budget. So you can imagine in a company that invests massive amounts of money in capital infrastructure, not being able to plan, beyond 1 year's funding is very inefficient. And if anything, a company like that should be at a minimum planning over a 5-year period, and that's through the regulatory process that's been established. That's what it should be operating, but it isn't. And there's also, and every year it has to deal with uncertainty over public budgets. The Northern Ireland Utility Regulator set the price control every 5 years for Northern Ireland Water, and that determines how much revenue they need each year to operate and to invest efficiently. And for the last 2 years, the department has been able to furnish NI Water with the level of funding that the utility regulators determined appropriate. So that might be an area that the committee are interested in looking at. The other thing to look at, I suppose, is whenever you're looking at an infrastructure company such as NI Water, around the world, infrastructure companies like that rely on the private sector for investment, for long-term borrowing, and in its current status as a hybrid model, it doesn't have access to the private equity markets. So, it basically puts all the burden on the taxpayer today in terms of paying for that investment, and it ignores the long life of that asset. And companies in England, the water companies in England, are really able to access private equity markets and borrow at a very low rate of interest over a long period of time. But in order for that to happen in Northern Ireland, it would need to be able to generate at least 50% of its income, from charges. And again, I know that's a controversial issue, but I'm sure that's one that the committee will probably deal with over this mandate. That's my part of the presentation. Finished. I'm just going to hand over to Susie then to run through.
Okay, I'll just pick up with the remaining sections of the paper, and as Des probably explained, my area is the environment, and I worked with the Environment Committee last mandate, so I'm going to continue with the parts of the remit that have been taken forward into the new department. So I've highlighted some areas that were considered by the Environment Committee last mandate that may well carry over into the new mandate. So I'll just begin with planning on section 7 of the paper, and I apologise if this is all old news for some of you, but it might be just a bit of a recap. So we had a reform of the planning system under the Planning Act 2011. Now this effectively came into force just last April, whenever we had the transfer of functions to councils. And this introduced a new two-tier planning system with the sharing of functions between local councils and the DOE at the time, but obviously now the new Department for Infrastructure. So councils, they now have the new responsibility of developing their own local development plans. They can also determine local small scale and major applications, and will also be responsible for planning, enforcement, investigation and action. Now the Department for Infrastructure, they will determine any regionally significant applications or anything that's called in by the department from the local councils. They will also produce regional planning policy and planning legislation, have oversight and guidance for councils, and overlook performance management. Now, while the reorganisation of central government has brought amalgamation and opportunity for joined up working under one department, there are some areas which have now historically worked together in the past but have now been separated. And this is really in relation to NIEA. So it would have been responsible for issuing environmental permits and licences, which are often required alongside planning applications. It gives advice on the need for environmental impact assessments to accompany any application, and is the statutory consultee on any planning application. However, this now sits under a completely different department, with the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Another aspect to the new system was the move away from the existing suite of planning policy statements to one strategic document. This is known as the Strategic Planning Policy Statement, or the SPPS. Now, this provides the overarching framework from which the local councils will develop their local development plans and their policies. It's also a material consideration in any planning application or appeal. However, we're currently in a transitional period where, until councils develop their own planning policies onto their local development plans, means that currently the councils must apply the existing suite of planning policies together with the new SPPS. So while there may be some overlap, the existing planning policies will provide that little bit more detail that the strategic SPPS can provide. So if there is any difference in policy direction, obviously the SPPS, it will take precedence. Then once the local development plans and the council's policies are developed, they will obviously, the existing planning policies will be set aside. Along with the new system, there's also new rules for mainly for local councillors, who will now make the final decision on planning applications, albeit with advice from planning officials. However, any council can run a scheme of delegation, where any small or local applications may be decided by officials, with major and contentious applications retained by councillors on a planning committee. As these new powers become established, it may be interesting to observe any differences in direction and approach adopted by each council, as well as the establishment, obviously, of a brand new relationship between the new department and local government. So the next section of the paper really identifies two areas that are undergoing policy review within planning. This is sustainable development in the countryside and renewable energy guidance. So discontent with the existing PPS 21 on sustainable development in the countryside was highlighted during the SPPS consultation. It was felt that existing policy, from which the SPPS has now been developed, prevents rural development and has contributed to rural depopulation. It was felt that rural policy needs to be more flexible and offer more development opportunities for the non-farmer based on local rural affiliation. In terms of renewable energy, last mandate the Environment Committee held an inquiry into wind energy, with the aim of assessing the effectiveness of PPS 18 on renewable energy. Now, the paper lists a number of recommendations by the committee. However, the issue of wind turbine noise was highlighted as the most contentious aspect, due to concerns expressed by stakeholders and advice given by a specialist advisor. It was suggested that the current guidelines, known as ETSU 97 or ETSU, should be reviewed on an urgent basis due to not being fit for purpose for modern changes in turbine technology. So a call for evidence in both these areas was issued by the Environment Minister in March. And now that they're closed, it may be of interest to ask the Department for an update on the responses and the Department's position in relation to both sustainable development in the countryside and turbine noise guidelines. Now, the next section of the paper looks at the taxi reform. This has been an ongoing issue for a number of years for the Environment Committee. Since the Taxi Act 2008 became law in April 2008, the DOE produced a suite of regulations And these are detailed in section 8 of your paper, and I'll not go through them all now, but I can do at a later stage. The Environment Committee identified that the proposed maximum fare system might disadvantage customers in rural areas where the dead miles apply. Now, dead miles may be described as a certain distance or percentage of the journey beyond which a taxi may not recover the costs or cover a charge. Concern was expressed that the taxis may refuse to service these areas where costs are unrecoverable. Minister Durkan agreed that a legislative amendment would be made within the last Assembly mandate to ensure that no negative impact would be experienced by taxi operators or customers in rural areas. A formal committee decision on the SR was not reached as it was laid after the committee's last meeting. So the committee may wish to review the implementation of the new suite of Taxi Act regulations and ensure the department undertakes a review of their impact, both in terms of rural areas and availability of disability accessible taxis. Now, the final section of the paper looks at new driving laws that have been brought in under the Road Traffic Amendment Bill. And this was passed by the Assembly in January of this year and received royal assent in March. Primary provisions are to introduce new drink drive limits and new police powers to stop and test, and also the introduction of a new graduated driver licensing system. And this is essentially to improve how new and young drivers are trained and tested, so as to help reduce the number of young people killed on our roads or who are responsible for accidents. So further details of the bill are provided in section 9 of the paper. And a suite of subordinate regulations is required to introduce these provisions. The Department consulted on a set of SRs in March, which may be laid in front of this committee in the new mandate. Implementation of the new arrangements for graduated driver licensing will require further public consultation and an extensive programme of subordinate legislation. Consideration may be needed on the practicality of applying these new arrangements and whether there will be need for increased police presence and resources for their implementation. So as I said, that was just a very brief run through the paper, but I'm happy to take any questions or discuss anything in further detail. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much. I have no members have indicated that they want to ask questions. I think they're just soaking everything up today, perhaps. The questions will come in weeks to come. But can I thank you both very much for your attendance this morning and for preparation for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask members if they are agreeable to the paper we've just heard, spoken on, presented to us? It should be sent to the department. Members agreed?
Great.
Okay. Okay, moving then to item 12, the draft forward work programme. Can I draw members' attention to the proposed forward work programme scheduled briefings for meetings for the next 4 weeks, which is at page 301 for June 2016. Members contend?
Yeah. Great.
Okay, this programme includes time to hear the Minister and officials from NDPBs, and this will allow the committee to form its own views in the advance of agreeing a more detailed forward work programme at the Strategic Planning Day in September. Everybody happy?
Great.
Okay. In terms of correspondence, item 13. Correspondence is at page 303. Any issues to raise? Members content? Okay. At page 305, there's an invitation from the Northern Ireland Assembly and Business Trust for the chairperson to attend a meeting following the AGM of the 13th of June at 4 p.m. As both the Deputy Chair and I are unavailable and will be out of the country, I would like to ask any member of the committee if they'd like to represent the committee at this meeting. Anyone available to do that? Yeah. Well, Clark will send out an email, and if members could come back in relation to that. At page 393, there's a note in relation to the Belfast Rapid Transit stakeholder meeting on the 4th of May. Can I advise members that the Assembly researcher Des McKibben has attended the RTS meetings on behalf of the committee in the past and then reports back. Would members be agreeable that that continues?
Agreed.
Thank you. At page 397, correspondence with Mr Martin Bell, Vice Chair of the Public Hire Coalition, regarding in relation to Taxi Act and public hire taxis, which members may well have read. In terms of actions, can I ask agreement from the committee that we send this to the department and ask for the department's response, and that response would come back to this committee before we reply, as opposed to the department replying to Mr Bell directly?
Agreed.
Okay. Everyone happy enough? Thank you. Proposed meeting dates. Members should note that our committee will meet, as long as everyone's content, that it meets at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning in this room, in the Senate chamber. Everyone agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can I just say, in relation to meetings, I do think it's important. The members may have different views, and other chairs certainly have different views in committees in which I have sat, but I do think it's important that, as much as is possible, within reason, that the committee should be out there meeting people and seeing communities and interacting with communities and government agencies and so on, and facing issues that are affecting our constituents across the country as much as is possible, rather than always bringing people here to Stormont, which of course has its role and is important, but I do think the committees are more relevant if they're out there actually interacting with people, and much so members could just bear that in mind. Moving then to item 15, any other business? Do members agree that press releases, news releases, statistical bulletins are emailed to members when received they will not be included in committee meeting packs? Agreed? Are members content that the Assembly research papers received by the committee are published after consideration by the committee?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Have members any other business that they wish to raise? No? Can I just go on that? There's the European referendum coming up later this month, and this committee is scheduled to meet on the 22nd of June, which is the day before. Obviously members across this chamber will take a different view on that particular referendum, but what's the committee's view in terms of the committee meeting? To say from my perspective, I think the committee has been waiting for some time to do its work following the election, and that we should continue to do our work on that day. Are members content with that, or has anyone got a counter view?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Continue.
Agreed.
And
Okay. There being no other indications from any member of any other issues to raise, I declare the meeting adjourned, except for a photograph, I think, which we're going to take.
It's already done.
Okay. Oh, but are we not getting a photograph of everybody standing group?
I can take care.
The next meeting of this committee will be on Wednesday, the 8th of June 2016, in the Senate Chamber, Parliament Buildings. Thank you very much for your attendance.